Greetings and welcome back to another Mass Effect Andromeda multiplayer guide. Today we're going to be looking at the Krogan Engineer. This is of course complementary to my recent Krogan Engineer Cat Gold solo. I don't think I'll be doing that anytime soon again. Very tedious. By and large, due to the shitty weapon I was using, the PA, although the equalizer was pretty good. You'll notice in that video, by the way, that even after using the PA for an entire solo for an hour, I still couldn't get gold assault right kills. There you go. Anyway, despite being powers, and specifically tech powers, but I guess, despite powers in general being somewhat underwhelming in this game, it's kind of, BioWare went from really powerful to just, you know, not useless, but not that great. The Krogan Engineer has the most potent detonation and power arsenal available of any of the engineer classes or kits, and or really of any of the tech oriented kits in general. The bottom tree is pretty obvious, I think, by now. If you're a Krogan, this is just how you want to spec. You want that resilience, just because you need the survivability. Extra shields, regeneration, a rage that automatically triggers, because this isn't a melee setup. You just want that rage. It's useful. So I've talked about that before with the Krogan Mercenary. The same would apply to the Vanguard, and as well as Gladiator, which I've played a fair bit by now. Offensive tech. This is not necessarily a no-brainer, so I'll have to explain some of these things, the reasons why I've chosen, made the choices I have made. I've experimented a lot with a Krogan Engineer, both in team games as well as solo, and yeah, I mean, because combo detonations, self-explanatory, are not that great in this game, you want the power enhancement. The extra duration is useful, particularly on Incinerate. It'll give you that little extra bonus as well as extra damage. You know, this is really up to you. There are a lot of armored enemies in the game, mostly in Outlaws, although there is the Fiend, as well as that weird weapon platform for Remnants, as well as the Destroyer, whose name, the other name I can't recall at the moment. This is just optional. I mean, if you want to give Overload a little extra boost against shields, but remember, Overload in general, powers just aren't that good, so Overload will never really be as good as against shields as a gun, say with Disruptor ammo. So this is totally up to you. Since this is coming off of my solo against the Cat, and there are Anointed and others with shields, well, I just decided to go with shields. Here's a pretty obvious no-brainer, but Krogan already have massive weapon capacity, and 15% accuracy is nice, but you know, it's not that useful. And stability weapons, 90% of the weapons have no recoil in this game, so there's no point. Now, in contrast to Solarian, Operator, and the Human Engineer, the Krogan Engineer actually benefits from this elemental tech status effect. You'll notice, for example, in the solo video, that when I'm incinerating enemies and I quickly hit them with an Overload, it does a surprising amount of damage compared to the normal Overload. And so this actually has some utility. It will help you kill enemies more quickly. But once again, tech powers are just not that great in this game at the moment. Incinerate, well, I just want to make it the best Incinerate possible. Now, Incinerate already does decent damage against armor, but once again, powers are just not that amazing against things, so you're not going to get Incinerate that just melts armor. So we do want the burning, the DOT, and the duration, but I think impact is important because there will be a lot of enemies that aren't armored, and the 50% against extra damage against armor is significant, but you know, particularly in my solo, there were plenty of enemies without armor, so I went this way. But I think this is optional. If you're fighting a lot of Outlaws, or you just want to save it for that Fiend, or certain Remnant units, then yeah, you can go this way. I don't really see this as sort of categorically, hey, you gotta take impact. I just prefer this because of its overall greater utility. And finally, this should be a no-brainer. Tech combos are not useful for their damage, but they are useful for crowd control. And the fact that Incinerate can now trigger tech combinations he's pretty potent. You saw it on display in the solo, so definitely go that way. Although I suppose this could be useful too, I guess. Anyway. There is an assault turret build that I can talk about. I'll talk about once I'm done with the full build here. But because assault turret is just really mediocre at best and terrible at worst, there's no point in speccing for this build in more than one point for it. It's useful distracting enemies, but yeah. Self-explanatory. Recharge. We always want recharge speed for everything because recharge, well, abilities, skills in this game have very long cooldowns, so you want a plus 20%, plus 30% cooldown on a base cooldown of 15 seconds is pretty significant. You know, whereas if Overload had a cooldown of, say, 6 seconds, right, then it'd be like, not really that big a deal, but for 15 seconds, it's pretty significant. Go this way. I mean, this is up to you. I really, at this stage, haven't experimented so much. I mean, Overload just doesn't do anything against shields. So yeah, you can spec it for against shields. You can spec it for more chain. Same thing here. I mean, I'm sorry if I don't sound enthusiastic. It's just, I used to love engineers, and they just don't do a whole lot anymore in terms of actual damage with powers, with tech powers. I wonder if it's the same case in single player. I haven't tried single player, but maximum charge, once again, completely up to you. I don't really think this is going to make a difference. And that's kind of the sad state of affairs with multiplayer in general. But she is, despite all of this, the most potent engineer out there. The combination of Overload and Incinerate is fairly potent, despite everything I've said. Now, there is a turret-oriented build that takes advantage of, specifically of Omni-Link, which means you'd forego something in what do you call it, Overload, as well as some a passive or two in the weapon power tree, and you would go for this just to get that extra recharge speed. 30%, once again, is pretty significant when you consider how mediocre the cooldowns are in general. So this can work. I mean, I found for the solo it didn't work quite as well as the elemental debuff effect, but it definitely can work with a team, and I mean, you'll have a lot of tech explosions, put it that way, with it. It's pretty useful. With a team, you know, your turret will be better protected. It's not that great for a solo, but yeah, this is an option. For this build, you would fully spec out turret just for the sake of it. You would spec only into the recharge speed here, and you would forego these last two evolutions. Pretty simple. But that's pretty much the Krogan engineer, and she is pretty good. Like I said, the best engineer out there, but that's not saying much. I'd really like to see some middle ground between the insanely powerful abilities or tech abilities that were present in the former multiplayer of Mass Effect 3 and the underwhelming abilities we have now. As far as weapons are concerned, you know, in that run I was using the Juggernaut shield just because a little extra shield. The paw is absolute trash, as you can see in the video. And the Equalizer. The Equalizer is just the best caster weapon, I think. Never worry about ammo. It allows you to circumvent using thermal clip storage. I mean, that 10% isn't a huge difference, but it's nice. Whereas I think thermal clip storage is useful for certain weapons. You could run, you know, as far as weapons are concerned, you don't have to run, I mean, you could run the Hurricane. Hurricane's a great weapon. It's really boring, I find. It's kind of recoil. It's boring, but it's really good. The Thokin is kind of wonky, but it's pretty good for applying ammo powers. But really, I think the Equalizer is just the go-to. So strive to get it. It's only rare. You'll get it eventually. Single-shot weapons, not so much. Basically, my recommendation there. But yeah, that's pretty much the Krogan in a nutshell. I mean, she's not some mysterious kid. But yeah, I mean, she's quite potent. She can be. And yeah, I definitely would recommend playing her, if only because she's fun. She's very tanky. She's tankier than the other kits that we call engineers, possibly with the exception of the operator, although he's not really an engineer. Well, he sort of is, I guess, because he's got shield boost, but still, really, really cool kit, and hopefully they will do something with it. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. This has been the Krogan Engineer Guide. If you haven't subbed yet, that would be appreciated. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day and take care. Bye-bye.